Hello again, Marquette University basketball fans. This is the Pip and Dodds Marquette video podcast, combining with, John Dodds, my colleague and friend, off to my left here and your right, publisher of MarquetteHoops.com, part of the 24/7 Sports Network, a subsidiary of CBS Sports. And along with JD, a mainstay, we have a good friend and just a gifted man, especially when it comes to the historical part of Marquette University basketball and the late and legendary Al McGuire. He's driven up all the way from Chicago to hang out with us, and it's a blessing to have you, Joe Moran. Welcome.
Thank you, Tom, for having me come out again and for the invitation for both of you. I appreciate it. It's great to spend some time just talking about Marquette history, which is rich, as all we both know.
Absolutely.
It's a great basketball history.
All right, John, get into it with your good friend.
Al McGuire used to say there wasn't a week that went by where someone didn't approach him about writing a book. Frank DeFord, a lot of national people. Talk about a little bit about how this came to be, where Al must have checked you out, because I interviewed Al, and before he did, he checked me out to see what I was all about. And so how did the book come to be?
Back in 1984, I was working for a weekly newspaper in Highland Park, Illinois, called the News Voice Newspapers. And at that point, after having been out of Marquette for 4 years, I was still very surprised that there was no book about Al McGuire. Here, one of the most colorful characters in all the history, not just of college basketball, but sports in America. He's right up there at the time that Muhammad Ali and Joe Namath and Howard Cosell were all telling it like it is.
Yeah.
And Al told it like it is.
In a colorful way.
Always.
Yeah.
And so why there wasn't a book about him, it was very surprising. One of the people I contacted to see if I could get a publisher or an agent was the late Reverend Andrew Greeley. Our family was familiar with his sister, the late Mary Durkin, and I contacted, she said, why don't you send a letter to Andy and see what he says. So I sent him a letter, and he sent me a letter back saying, if there can be a book about Howard Cosell, there certainly can be a book about Al McGuire. So he put me in touch with his agent in New York City, Nat Sobel, and I received a letter from Nat Sobel probably a few weeks later, and he said, if you can get Al McGuire to make this his book, where he'll go on the Today Show and he'll go on Good Morning America and all the other programs, he said, we can get you a publisher. I approached Al, and Al said no. And I had become a little bit frustrated with Al because...
And you two had a relationship prior. It's not as if you went in cold, right?
I had interviewed him for a story about the reunion of his 77 team for the Sporting News. And when I brought the copies up to his assistant's office, which at that time was in Mequon, Wisconsin, Janine McEwen was his assistant. I said to her, what did Al think of the story? And she said, it's too short. Too short.
All right, then write a book.
And so I said, has anybody approached him about wanting to do his biography? And she said, get in line. Everybody wants to write it.
Yeah.
And so I had somehow eventually become friendly with Al's youngest son, Robbie. And he mentioned that we're going to be doing Al's going to be doing a talk before the DePaul University UCLA basketball luncheon coming up within the next month or so. You can go and you approach him then. So after he gave his talk, I met with him afterward, and he said, book sounds like a great idea.
Wow.
So he said, at this time his office was up in Pewaukee, and he said, contact Jeannie Busalacci, who was then his assistant, and she'll give you all kinds of audio tapes that I've made over the years. 2 weeks later, I get a note in the mail from Al saying, I've decided to pull back. I said, I know I promised that I would, let you write the book, but I've decided to pull back. I'm not ready. So I decided that the only way to really do this is to go unauthorized. And I began to talk to one of his childhood friends growing up in Rockaway Beach, a man named Norman Oakes. And he put me in touch with Jim Lytle, who played for Al at Belmont Abbey College. And after I talked to both of them, it was Labor Day weekend, 1994. I get a call in my office from Al.
Word travels.
He said, Joe, this is Coach. I know I haven't tried to stop you from doing this, but I'm not sure you know the right way to go about it. He said, I'm getting on a plane to West Lafayette at Tuesday morning. You're welcome to come on the plane. There's an extra seat and we can talk. I said, I can't because of work considerations. So I said, can I come up to your office tomorrow morning, which is a Saturday? And he said, sure, come on up. So I went up and we chatted for a little bit more than 3 hours. And during the course of that conversation, I told him how I was going about it, the fact that I had done some research in the Marquette archives, and that I had talked to some people. And so he said, it seems like you're going about this too theoretical. Now, I didn't know that Al knew what theoretical was.
And maybe he didn't, but he had a way of just
But I said,
the words in.
and I don't know what it was that made me say this, but I said, Al, what you have to do in these research projects is it's almost like you're putting the pieces of a puzzle together. And I think it struck something with Al when I said that, because it was an image. It was something that he could picture in his mind. So we sat and chatted, and he continued to say, but he says, Joe, you really don't know me. He said, Roger Janes traveled with me and went to garage sales and antique shows and was on the road with me. And he said, you really don't know me. And I said, this is the only way to start to get to know you and find out about your whole life. And at the end of the conversation, as we were leaving his office, he picked out one of those Oscar Mayer Wienermobiles and he signed it to me. And as we were getting in the car, he said, now, it's your book, it's your baby. You talk to whoever you want to. It doesn't make any difference to me. But I'm not going to be involved in it. I'm not going to go on the Today Show. I'm not going to do book signings. Because as far as Al was concerned, a book signing where you sit there for 3 hours and sign and make small chat with people who want to have you sign the book, that was too confining for him. He didn't want to do that. So he said, you do whatever you want, but I'm not going to be involved in that respect. I had interviewed Marv Albert sometime later, and Marv said, if you can get Al to come on my Madison Square Garden Network show, we can talk about the book and promote it. So I brought that up to Al, and Al said no. So if there's anything that I've learned about my dealings with Al McGuire, is when he said no, you could not twist his arm and make him change his mind. That was his last word, and in a way that was always very, very impressive.
Now, the foreword of your book is from Bobby Knight, and I had one Bobby Knight story with Al where I was at a tax seminar, probably 5-6 years ago down in Chicago, and it was insurance and tax, and Bobby Knight was going to be one of our speakers. So I knew he was going to be there. I thought, great, wow. Well, Sunday night, we're all going out to dinner, and I looked, and I saw Bob Knight standing there in the lobby alone. So I always knew what I was going to do if I saw Bob Knight. My dad was a basketball coach, and there was a famous Marquette game in 1973 where Marquette had this 2-2-1 full court press that was absolutely oppressive, and Marquette would turn the ball over. There was Marcus Washington and George Frazier in the front lines, and so Maurice Lucas was on that team. And Bobby Knight, his team beat that with Quinn Buckner as a freshman by bounce passing, reversing, pivoting. And my dad was at home saying, look at this, fundamentally sound. This is amazing. So when I saw Bob Knight, I always thought, in order to get credibility, I was going to raise that issue. So I explained the situation. I said, my dad raved about your press offense, how you beat Marquette's oppressive 2-2-1 full court press. And he said, do you know Al McGuire? I said, well, I knew a little bit. He goes, did you know Rick Majerus? I said, yeah, I knew Rick Majerus. He goes, that very point, he said, Rick Majerus were at a coaching clinic outside of Pittsburgh, national clinic, and there's thousands of coaches there. And Rick goes up on an overhead projector and says, how you do a 2-2-1 full court press. And he was up there, and it was just a brilliant, he broke it down like Vince Lombardi broke down the power sweep into each individual segments. And so everybody cheered and clapped when he was done. And Bob Knight, he said, I walked up on stage and I said, let's give Rick Majerus a big round of applause for teaching us the intricacies of that press. And then he said, now, listen up, here's how you beat it. And he goes, and I showed him exactly that game, and he broke down what they did. I mean, so I had total credibility in this lobby. And then he said, I'll tell you what Al McGuire is. He said, Al McGuire, I'm coaching the 1984 Olympic team, and we're visiting him in Milwaukee. It was a hot summer night. I said, I was at the game. It was Terry Cummings and Dave Corzine, Mike Dunleavy Sr. playing the Olympians. And so Michael Jordan did some unbelievable things. And we were sitting in the end zone. And I said, I've never seen anything like this. This guy can fly. And so they beat the NBA team by about 15. And he said, Al McGuire was there also, and he had this tennis hat. And he wanted to talk to me, but they were whisking me away for the media afterward. So I'm kind of like, gee, Al. And Al goes, that's all right. So they go off, and he has this hour press conference, and he said, a beautiful night in Milwaukee. I walked up Kilbourne Avenue toward the Pfister Hotel. Got to the Pfister Hotel, went up to my suite, and went in, opened up my door, and I looked, and on the pillow was my bed turned down and a tennis hat that Al was wearing on my pillow with this note on it. And he goes, you want to know what was on the note? And I'm like, yeah. What did he say? He said, dear Bob, you're doing a great job. Good luck. Go for the gold. If you need me to take any pressure off of you by saying, I don't think you're going to win the gold because you guys are just a bunch of college kids who've been playing for a couple of months versus these pros. Here's my number. Give me a call. And then he just turned to me and says, that was Al McGuire.
Yeah.
No doubt.
Kind of a thing that I thought. But he did tell us about your getting him to do the forward.
When Al finally agreed to do the book, he said, there are two people you should have do the forward, either Rick Majerus or Bobby Knight. And so I decided that Bob Knight would probably be the best, as somebody who's won national titles and has great respect in the coaching fraternity. So I wrote a letter to Bob Knight in Bloomington, Indiana, and I received a beautiful typed letter with his signature saying that I'd love to do the forward for the book. He said I'd be honored. And you were talking about how Al may have checked me out or might have checked me out before agreeing to do the book. I'm almost positive that Bobby Knight called Al and said, is this guy,
Legit. Huh?
legit?
Yeah.
Is this above board? And I'm sure Al gave him the okay. And then Bobby Knight had his secretary forward a number of the things that he'd written. And so we put it together, and he did it. I haven't spoken with Bob Knight since he did the forward. I do believe I sent him a copy of the book, but I haven't spoken with him since.
Yeah, that's fascinating. We've got a lot to get into. We're going to continue in a moment with Joe Declan Moran. He is a marvelous writer. That's what You Can Call Me Al. I feel like I want to read it again. You know, it's hard to believe. The colorful journey of college basketball's original flower child, Al McGuire. So, Joe, it's an honor to have you with us. We
Thank
can't
you.
wait to continue. Ladies and gentlemen, we're all about Marquette basketball. Pip and Dodds, the Marquette Video Podcast. JD, John Dodds, publisher of MarquetteHoops.com, part of the 24/7 Sports Network, a subsidiary of CBS Sports. And John isn't even paying me extra to say all that. I do it out of just the love I have for him in my heart. Joe, we're going to talk more in your
Thank
great
you
book
very
in a
much.
moment. Thank you.